Hi, this is Jason Hershey, designated broker and managing member of TELUS Real Estate Solutions, LLC. Welcome to Landlord 101. This video was recorded during one of our live Landlord 101 classes and is part of a series. In this video, we discuss some basic lease terms, including those that are required and some that we recommend. The class and I also discuss some instances of property-specific issues that illustrate the need to have a lease that meets your unique needs. I hope you enjoyed this video and find the information useful. Be sure to visit our website, telusre.com, and give us your feedback. That way we can improve the classes and this video series. Thank you.
In Washington State, any real estate contract has to be in writing. So if you're renting property to somebody, you are in a contract with them. And if you don't have a written lease, it means you have a verbal one, which is weird because it means that in Washington State, you don't have a contract, so you're really kind of operating illegally. So really what it means is that if you don't have a written lease, as a landlord, you're wrong. I don't care what it is, you're wrong. You're not going to be able to enforce any of the terms of your lease if your lease isn't in writing. Okay? If you have a lease that's longer than 1 year, it needs to be notarized. So let's say you got a tenant and they say, I'm in from working at Microsoft for the next 2 years. I want to guarantee where I'm living. I'd like a little bit of a discount on the rent. I'll rent it for 2 years. Great. You sign your lease. If you don't get it notarized, it's not an enforceable contract. As a landlord, you're wrong. Okay? That's why, so commercial leases all the time, every commercial lease at the end of it just has a notary page because almost all commercial leases are longer than 2 years. So most residential leases end in a year. Okay? So some common provisions of your leases is you're going to want to say what the length of the lease is. You know, is it a 6-month lease, a 12-month lease, or is it a month-to-month lease? So it runs 30 days at a shot. You know, what is the length of the lease that you're in? And in most cases, if you're on a 12-month lease, you're going to include some verbiage as to what happens at the end of the 12 months. At the end of the 12 months, does this convert to a month-to-month lease? Or at the end of 12 months, does the lease automatically end? And unless I say otherwise, you should assume you're moving out. Those types of things.
What do you do? I mean, if you want to keep your tenants, do you just go month to month, or do you ask
All of
them to
my
sign
leases
a new
automatically
lease?
go month. When I do them, they automatically go month to month. And then at some point along the line, depending on my level of motivation and how badly I want to keep the tenant, or what am I trying to do with my financing? Because if I'm refinancing the property, my bank will usually like to see a lease in place. I may encourage my tenants either by saying I won't raise your rent if you sign another year, or I will give you a discount if you sign another year, that type of thing. And get them to sign another year lease.
But
You like to use the 1-year lease.
Yeah, again, because I don't want to go through the hassle of notarizing things.
So you just let it go month to month at the end of the lease,
Right.
and then if you, for some reason, decide that it would benefit you to have a new lease, you just offer them a little incentive.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's typically what I'll do.
And the incentive, a lot of the times is, I won't raise your rent.
Yeah,
For
that
the
could be an
next year,
incentive.
if you sign a lease right now, for the next year, your rent stays the same.
And
But
you're
if
gonna-
not, it could go up.
And it could be based on what's going on in the market at the time. Are rents really tight? Are vacancy rates really low, and everybody else is raising their rents? That type of thing. So number of and names of tenants, all of them. What I tell my tenants, so I get a family moving in, I say, I want the baby's name on the lease. That just avoids any confusion. I want everybody's name. Because when it comes time to evict, you have to evict everybody. This is there's 5 roommates. If 3 of the roommates move out, and the other 2 are there, you don't know who's there. If you only had 2 names on the lease, who knows if those are still the people there. So you want to evict everybody. And it avoids any fight in the courts about who's getting evicted. That type of thing. You're required to provide landlord contact information and the address to pay the rent. Where can they pay the rent at? That's a Washington State law says you have to tell them where they can pay the rent at. Don't know why you wouldn't tell them that. I guess some landlords must say, I'm going to show up at your door. Well, there's nothing wrong for you, with you to say you're gonna pay your rent at that address. But, but if they've got the money at that address, you can't then say they didn't, you didn't come pick it up. You can't say, well, you didn't pay your rent. Hey, it says my rent's due and payable on the 1st, here. I was here, you weren't here, so I couldn't have been late. Those things. Anyway, you're gonna put in your PO box, your mailing address, whatever it is. Even if you're having them pay by electronic check or something like that, or ACH debit. Okay. So the utilities, what utilities are included, and what utilities are the tenants paying. And you're gonna do things like list any fees for late notices, receipt, so if they're late with their rent, how much are you gonna charge them if they're late? If you give them a notice, if you gave them a 3-day, most often I'll see is a 3-day pay up or vacate, so, well, it takes me time to go deliver that notice to them. So I'm gonna charge them a fee for doing that. That type of thing. Receiving notices. So the water bill is in your name, and if the water company sends me a notice saying that you didn't pay the bill, I'm gonna charge you a fee. Perfectly reasonable thing to do, because you don't want your tenant, so water bills are a lien on your property. Last thing you want is your tenant to not pay the water bill, run it up really high, and then leave, and then you're stuck with the bill. So if you charge them every time they're late, then that encourages them to pay their bill, and kind of gives you a little bit more ammunition in order to evict them if you need to. Some other legally required provisions, you're required to give them a mold notice. It's a very scary thing to give tenants, because it makes it sound like you've got mold in the house. But every apartment or house, you're required to give them a notice about how to recognize mold and what to do about it if they see it. If it's a building built 1978 or before, you need to give them a lead notice. And the lead notice is going to say whether or not you have tested for, or whether or not you know of any presence of lead in the property. 99% of the time, people say, I don't know. Now, I know people who have run into problems because they've had tenants check later. So, it's like somebody, tenant moved into a 1910 house and then checked for lead in the paint. Why they did that, I don't know. But the landlord, once they knew about it, they had a problem to deal with. Those types of things.
So do you have to worry about that if your house is after 78?
Not after 1978.
I mean, somebody could have saved a can of paint, I guess.
In theory, yeah, but 1978, they stopped making paint with lead in it. I've been told, so this is anecdotal, that there wasn't a whole lot of lead paint in the Northwest for some reason. I don't know why, but there is plenty of it, because, like I said, this is a real case where the tenant checked for lead in the paint. Did the little test thing, and there was some. There are lots and lots of rules around. I'd be very hesitant to buy an old house now as a landlord, because of the rules around lead-based paint. Because basically, if you're going to disturb paint in an older house, you have to assume that there's lead unless you check for it, and anybody doing that work has to be certified.
Yeah, I had a friend that had an older house, wanted to get it painted, got a painting contractor who said, I can't do this, I'm not certified for lead paint.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So, yeah, big issue now. It's very big pain. So.
I have a quick question. Where do you get a mold notice? I mean,
Well, if you're a member of the Rental Housing Association, you can get them from them. And in fact, that's one of the notices that the Rental Housing Association, you can get off their website for free. You don't have to be a member for. So, because it's actually a federal, I don't know if it's a federal or state form, so you can actually get it off the state website somewhere. The Rental Housing Association has a lot of the forms that you need that you can just get for free.
okay,
Lead-based paint's
Great.
another one. So.
great.
Let's see, carbon monoxide detectors, so all of your rental properties, I think as of now, or as of January, something like that, have to have carbon monoxide detectors in them.
What if
So-
what if it's all electric?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, still have to.
Right, doesn't matter, even if it's all electric, even if you have no fire burning appliances. Why? Because your tenant might bring in a barbecue grill. That is the logic that has been explained to me, and it's the logic that actually made sense, because people have done it. People have brought in their barbecue grills when the power went out and killed themselves,
They do it every year when
They
the
do it
power
every
goes
year.
out.
okay? If you're in Seattle, you have a whole bunch of forms that are specific to Seattle you have to provide people. So I'll just state it that way. The difference in the packets is, the Seattle packets is about twice the size as the ones that I use in the rest of the state. So,
Do you have to give them, do you have to have a notice saying you have CO detectors, or can they just, if they're there?
you have to have them. And in the Rental Housing Association, they actually have a particular notice for them. Yeah, and so, I'll have to check this and email you guys, because I'm trying to remember if it's a state or Seattle thing. There is a smoke detector form in the Rental Housing Association stuff, and I don't know if it's a Seattle specific one, where you tell them, and in the form it says there are smoke detectors, and it says they're battery operated or they're hardwired, and it says, and one of the pieces of it is that as a tenant, if you disconnect this, you can be fined by the fire department if they come in and inspect the house and see that.
Mhm. That's why we always go in that twice a year.
Ours,
And it's the tenant who gets fined, not you.
Yeah.
ours we have a plug-in CO detector and the smoke detectors themselves are hardwired.
Right, that's fine.
Well,
So unfortunately, we can't go in and check them every 6 months.
Well, yeah, you can still say, I'm coming in, twice a
coming
year,
in
we
to
come
check
in and
them.
we
Right.
check
To make
this
sure
and
they're
this.
working.
We
Oh,
check that the
Yeah.
fire,
Okay.
those
Yeah,
are still
yeah.
working, we test
Kind of
them all,
looking to
we
make,
look
I mean,
around
to
to make
me,
sure everything's
what
okay.
typically what I'm looking for is like the bathroom, or, the bedroom, and seeing if they've, if the kids or the adults have disconnected them, because usually if they're doing that, it's because they're smoking, that type of thing, so. Other provisions that might be in your lease agreement, whether or not you allow pets, and if you do allow pets, what are the terms under which you allow pets? So all of my rentals, I allow pets, and I say they have to be neutered, they have to be under your control at all times, things like that. Certain cities don't allow certain breeds, so those are all things that have to be addressed. Smoking, you allow smoking, and if you do allow smoking, what are the conditions? For all of my properties, I say you can't smoke in the house. I don't care if you smoke outside, you can't smoke inside. Drugs, crime, domestic violence. So the Rental Housing Association forms has a catch-all one that says no illegal drugs. So it says no illegal drugs. It doesn't define what an illegal drug is. No crime, domestic violence. So what's your domestic violence policy? My domestic violence policy, so with my tenants, I like to explain the lease to them in English. I say, here's what the lease says. Here's what it means to me. So when we come to the drugs, crime, and domestic violence, I say, drugs, no drugs. Now I'm gonna have the whole pot conversation with them. Crime, no violent crime. I don't care if you shoplift, violent crime, no.
It means they're evicted. It means they're
That
evicted.
means you're automatically out. No questions asked, you're getting evicted. So, now then, and if you start having this conversation, well, what if I wasn't convicted with your prospective tenant?
Uh-huh.
They're no longer a prospective tenant as far as I'm concerned.
Uh-huh.
It's like, oh, I was accused, I wasn't evicted.
Uh-huh.
So, domestic violence. So, and I say if there is a report of domestic violence in the house, everybody's out. I don't care who started it. I don't care what the conditions are. Everybody's out, no questions asked.
Okay.
So I don't care if the guy hit the girl or if the girl hit the guy. Why? Because it's really about the kind of the level of liability I have if I let stuff like that go on. So if there's an accusation of domestic violence and somebody hits somebody, and then later on, and then I know about it, and I didn't make somebody get out, and then somebody kills somebody the next week, am I gonna get sued for that? Might be a pretty good chance of that. Ask the police who respond to these things and then don't do something. That's why the police do something automatically anymore, right? And, you know, and these are all cases where chances are if you get in the midst of who's right and who's wrong, you're gonna get a whole hassle problem. So I just say, everybody's out. Guest policy. Hey, my cousin's gonna come and visit for a couple of weeks. Is that okay? So my lease forms have that already covered. And you can say, you know, you can have a guest staying X number of days out of the month or out of the week or whatever, and you don't have to ask my permission. You know, mine is, I think it's 14 days out of 30 days, you don't have to ask my permission. Otherwise, I need to give specific permission, and permission may, and I tell them, and it may be that I'm gonna ask, you know, depending on the circumstances and in my mood of the day, I may ask for an application from them. It's only happened a couple of times, and when it has happened, I've actually had them, I said, give me an application, give me a copy of their driver's license, they can stay with you. In this case, it was, they were gonna stay for like 2 months or something. I said, great, I'm not gonna run the background check, but I still want all their information. And they left in 2 months. And then and you keep your eye on it. Because what you wanna do is keep track of who all's in the house. Right? Satellite dishes, so do you allow satellite dishes to be put up? If you don't have a satellite dish on the house and the tenant wants it, chances are the satellite dish company is gonna, and if they know that they're a tenant, they're gonna have to provide specific permission to put it up. The satellite company won't do it otherwise, and so this can serve as their permission. And in my case, you know, I think by this point they all have satellite dishes, so it doesn't matter. But if they say, well, I want to move it, I'm gonna say, here are my rules for installing satellite dishes. You can't do this, you can't do that. I tell them, you can't install the dish on the roof. I don't want holes in my roof, and any holes have to be caulked so that it's sealed, those types of things. And I always tell the tenants, you can't install it. It has to be done by a professional because I don't want them falling and slipping and hurting themselves and then suing me because I let them get on the ladder. Renter's insurance, whether or not you require them to have renter's insurance. Many landlords require tenants to have renter's insurance because that covers the landlord in case the tenant has a guest who comes over and gets drunk and slips and falls. Because if the tenant doesn't have insurance and they're tenants, chances are they don't own a lot of assets. Who's that person who fell going to sue? You, the landlord, even though you had nothing to do with it. I always like to remind my tenants that my insurance does not cover their personal property. So if the property burns, and I've actually had a fire in a property, the tenant, my insurance doesn't cover their personal property, and my insurance doesn't give them a place to live. So at that point, they've lost everything, they're now dependent on the Red Cross for help. Right? If they've got renter's insurance, the renter's insurance will give them a place to live and replace their belongings. Great deal for them, and renter's insurance is cheap. So, for me personally, what I do is I don't require it, I encourage it, and I tell people that if you have a pet, I require it. Or, and like I just had some tenants that have been around for a while, they said, we're gonna get a pet, and I said, great, I won't charge you a pet deposit if you get renter's insurance. Because, you can charge extra deposits for pets.
Do you require a certain minimum amount of insurance? I mean,
That situation came up, and I said, and at that point I just said, get whatever amount that they say, because I was happy they got any.
Right, okay.
So, again, you may want to talk to your insurance company and see what they do.
They said we should require it, but they didn't say an amount, I don't think.
So, that would be my next question. Well, how much is an appropriate amount,
I guess I should ask them.
Yeah.
So
I'd be interested to hear what they say, because I had a tenant ask that question.
Okay.
What does a pet have to do with renter's insurance?
Liability. They've got a dog and the dog bites somebody.
Okay, all right.
That was my logic, was that I was less concerned with the damage the pet was gonna do to the house than the liability the pet would have would increase on the property in general. I figured that's a much bigger loss, potentially, than anything else was.
Or you can tell them you want both.
Or you can tell them you want both. In my case, this was a tenant who had been around for a while, and I was just kind of, I really wanted them, honestly, in this case, I really wanted this tenant to have renter's insurance because they live in an old wooden house, and I'm always afraid it's gonna burn down. I know that sounds bad, But, you know, the
But
house was
once you have
built in
one fire,
1900.
you get iffy.
Yeah,
And then you're getting,
yeah, so I really, you know. So roommates, again, you know, so do you have a provision for roommates? You know, something like, the Rental Housing Association had this statement of economic unity. They don't have it anymore, so I'm gonna have to, you know, put something by hand in the next time it comes up that says, you know, I consider you guys one group, I want, and, you know, here are my rules for roommates, type of thing.
So, that old form that they had for economic unity, you can still use it, it's just that they don't provide it anymore?
It's just not up on their site,
Oh, I
so I'd
see.
have to dig up an old lease to see if I could find it.
I bet it's in your old packet, was it not in your old packet?
No, I couldn't find it. I'd have to
Okay.
find,
Right.
I'd probably have to find a lease from almost 10 years ago. It
Okay,
was the last time I think I used it.
I think we skipped by maintenance by tenants.
Oh, thank you, maintenance by tenants. So I tell my tenants, no, they can't do, single-family homes, I want my tenants to mow the yard. For
We
example,
do.
I
I mean, I would have wondered about that.
yeah, so, in my case, you know, it depends on where I was at. If I had a homeowners association that the building was a part of, and they were gonna fine me if the grass got too long, I might say, you know, I'll hire the landscaper, and that's included in your rent. You know, I've also had this conversation with the tenants to say, I'll give you a choice. I'll either charge you an extra $100 a month for rent, and we'll mow the lawn, or I'll hire somebody to do it, or you can do it. Which one would you like? You know. The other thing is you know, is there a certain amount of maintenance, like repairs, that you would want them to do? You know, so I don't do this personally, but I know a lot of landlords will say any repair item less than $50 is the responsibility of the tenant. That way, if a toilet needs unplugged, the tenant takes care of it. You know, and honestly, things like toilet repairs, you know, plugged up is the responsibility of the tenant, and I would say that. You know, it's the nightmare for landlords. Oh, their toilet's plugged, and I'm gonna have to go over in the middle of the night and take care of it. I've had that call, but we'll talk about some of these other rules around that, but it doesn't have to be that way. And it's really a matter of what you set as the expectation with the tenants. I mean, and it could be, you could just say, you know, the tenant's responsible for all repairs and any repairs if you wanted. I don't think that's reasonable, and I wouldn't want to trust tenants to do it. The
yeah,
other-
we don't want tenants working on the place.
As a general rule, you don't want tenants working on the place, right? That's why I say, you know, it's one thing when it's under $50, because we're talking about unplugging a toilet, but when it comes to other repairs, you don't want tenants doing it. You don't want tenants replacing your roof, you know, because you don't know if they've got workers' comp insurance, what happens if they injure themselves.
Wiring, anything.
Right, yeah, anything, yeah, you don't want to trust that stuff to the tenants.
What about cleaning the gutters?
That would be a
Do you expect
question.
tenants to do that?
Uh,
Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. I would say it hasn't come up, so if it's anything that's ever been an issue, so here's what I see with people that have been landlords for a long time, and I do commercial real estate, and so I really see this, commercial landlords get these really long, convoluted, weird leases over time. Because what happens is every time some weird thing happens, they add it to their lease. If you've ever had the gutter thing come up, chances are the next time you do a lease, you're gonna call that out specifically.
Yeah,
But
well, the thing is I didn't realize they weren't. And then, you know, so last summer or last spring or whatever, oh man, the gutters are all plugged up, you need to come unplug it because it's running all over the roof. And I'm thinking, you can't clean your own gutters, hello?
yeah.
You know, and I thought, well, maybe I'm not being
Yeah.
reasonable.
And there's the challenge, right? Do you want them up on a ladder and getting hurt?
Well, yeah,
And
so
Yeah, you
possibly,
know.
possibly crawling around on the roof because they don't know how to do it from a ladder? or,
Yeah.
you know,
I'm not
Yeah,
sure
so-
we
Yeah.
do want that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are things that you want to consider.
Yeah, okay.
And as a landlord, it's really gonna be an individual choice, you know, and those are exactly the considerations that you're gonna have.
I mean, around here, you gotta do it once a week, you know? Should I go down there once a week and clean the gutters, you know, I mean,
Right.
I don't know what's reasonable.
Yeah, and whatever you decide is reasonable, because there's plenty of arguments both ways. So, for me, And it may even vary on the property and on the tenant, what you're willing to do. So, and then how much rent you're charging. So the more rent you're charging, so if you're doing all of those things, here's what I do. If I was charging premium rent, or if I was going to be doing it myself, I would charge premium rent and saying, by the way, here's some of the services I provide. I clean your gutters for you. You know, you'll know that we're doing that, and then I would do it.
Yeah, if you got a two-story steep pitched thing with gutters way up there, you don't want
Well,
that.
Yeah,
yeah,
you
I
want
mean, it
that.
depends on, I mean, this particular place was really easy.
Right.
You know, I mean, to get up there and clean.
The
it
challenge
up,
is that if you
it's
didn't set
like-
that expectation up front in some fashion, well, by saying tenant's responsible for maintenance,
Yeah, and I never did because it was like, well, I just expect that people have enough sense to clean the gutters, you know?
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so,
but we'll talk about changing leases here
You hit the
in a
key
minute
right
if
there,
we haven't
though.
already.
Is they can't expect anything, I mean.
Well, yeah,
That's what
you
this
know.
is all about.
Yeah, well, it just surprised me because I just assumed they had been,
Right.
you know, and they were so
Sense,
bad by the time they
Tenants
told
don't
me
even
that-
clean furnace filters, so yeah,
Yeah.
they won't do anything else. So military, so if you've got a tenant who's in the military, so just an FYI, if they get deployed, they're automatically out of their lease. That's federal law. And so if you've got somebody in the military, I've got, the Rental Housing Association has an addendum that basically says that, and that just lets them know that you know.
Yeah, say that again.
So if you've got a tenant who, I have a rental up in Marysville, and so we get folks from the Navy sometimes,
Right.
right? So, you know, hey, there's a new war in Iraq, they're gonna get deployed, you know, and they're not gonna be living there. They're no longer responsible for that lease.
so if
You
you
know,
have a
they're
voice,
automatically
Right.
allowed to break their lease. And so at the Rental Housing Association, there's a form that basically acknowledges that and lets them know that you know that type of thing. Single-family homes, so good provisions when renting single-family homes, tenant pays utilities, fees for receiving late notices, tenant maintains the yard, tenant responsible for minor repairs, maybe up to a certain dollar amount. The other thing that comes up with single-family homes, we just did this, had to replace a refrigerator, will you replace appliances? So if you're providing appliances, will you replace them? What it says in my lease is that it is optional for me to replace them. Why? Because what I don't want is for the tenant to call me up and say the refrigerator's out, I'm not paying my rent until you replace it, type of thing. So I say, I'm providing you up front, in English I say, yes, I'm providing a refrigerator, this is not part of your lease. I'm providing it as a convenience, and I will probably replace it if it goes out, but I may not,
That's a good point.
you know. And then I replace it, because I'm a great landlord, but I just don't want to get held to that level of
Right,
responsibility.
that's a good point.
You know, especially if they're abusing things, in this case.
How do you
So-
feel about supplying washer and dryer?
I charge a premium for rent. So, washer and dryers are a great thing. I get them for free. So, are you familiar with Freecycle? Freecycle is a Yahoo group. She loves Freecycle. People give away washers and dryers,
washers, dryers, refrigerators,
because they
stoves,
replace them,
you name it.
right? And so they've got an old one, but it still works.
Right.
And so I've got a couple sitting. I have a washer sitting in my garage right now, waiting for me. And I've got a refrigerator just sitting in my garage, not being used right now, waiting for the next one to go out.
So it's freecycle.com?
It's free. Yeah,
Make sure you leave your information or your email and I'll send
I
it.
will email this to everybody because it's a
a
Yahoo
Yahoo
Groups thing, so I don't know exactly. But I think if you just Bing or Google Freecycle, it'll come up.
It's
Okay.
But-
really different because it's per area.
But there's also I don't know what they're called now. It used to be called Crapo up in Snohomish, is a used appliance place.
Yeah.
You can get them really cheap there too. They used to be, I saw their name and said, oh, it's Crapos, and they're actually called something else, CRAP.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I just personally, do you think it's worth
Oh, yeah.
it
Yeah.
to supply a washer dryer?
Yeah, when I can get them cheap, I can get more rent by doing that. You charge 10, 20 bucks more a month in rent than a place that doesn't provide those. And when I can get them for free or for 50 bucks a piece, you know. But I mean, seriously, I get them for really cheap,
Okay,
you know.
great.
You know, you get them at the used appliance place kind of refurbished and they're, 50 or 100 bucks.
Right.
Mind you, I'm not providing really nice ones, you know, unless it's a really nice rental.
Yeah, I just wondered if you thought that it was, you know,
Yeah.
it was reasonable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like doing it. I don't
I
always
do.
do it. It depends on if I have any handy, basically.
yeah.
And, you know, but I think it makes it easier to get renters. It's much easier for a renter to say, I don't need the washer and dryer you're providing, than to have the renter say, I don't have one. Oh, you're not providing one? Ah, crap, I've gotta go think about whether or not I'm gonna get it myself, right? So it's that, how big is your group of possible renters? The group of renters is much bigger if you provide the appliances. Because then you've got all the people who do need an appliance, plus all the people who don't need an appliance. All of them can be your renters. Because if they don't need the appliance, they've got their own, all I have to do is take it out and put it in my garage. You know, or sell it at a garage sale, you know, expecting that I'll buy another one later on, whatever it is. You know, that type of thing. So where do you get your forms? So Rental Housing Association. I love the Rental Housing Association. So it's $70 a year for membership and $25 for online access to their forms, or you can buy the forms individually for like $1. You know, but for less than $100 a year, you get that newsletter. You get that letter, that newsletter every month that tells you what all's going on and what all the law changes are. They do a lot of lobbying, so they fight all these anti-landlord rules. You know, or try, and if they see that they're going to lose the battle anyway, they at least try and make them reasonable. You know, they say, okay, look, the way that your rule was written wasn't gonna work for anybody. Let's rewrite it a little bit so that we're not being completely tortured. Those types of things. And then again, they have classes, online access. They have a phone number you can call and ask questions. So typically, when you're that, if you're a member of the RHA, you have somebody you can email or call to ask the kind of question that you were asking. Okay. You can also just get them from the web. So if you search on the web, you know, residential lease, Washington State, you can find all kinds. You know, you gotta wonder whether or not they're good, but there's like LegalZoom.com, places like that are probably okay. Office supply stores, you go to Staples, you can find leases. You can go to an attorney and get your attorney to write a lease, particularly for you. Or if you have a property manager, they can provide a lease. You know, or a real estate agent, which property managers have to have real estate licenses, so they're kind of the same things. What you want to do is make sure the forms are legal in the state of Washington, and you want to look at them and make sure they meet your needs, because everybody's got a little bit different situation, right? And so there may be specific considerations for your property, you know, gutters, you know, or certain ways you want to run your rental business that are different than somebody else.
Do you have, you know, recently I tried to get the Washington landlord tenant laws.
Uh-huh.
And like online, do you have like
I can send you a link to those.
okay, that would be great, because it was really, you know, it was scattered all over, and I mean, it's like,
But the thing is, you can't just go to a site and download it. What you do is you go to a site and you get a page that lists all the sections. And then to print out or access each section, you have to go back to that page that's the index and click on each miserable
Well, I know
individual
I've got it, so
section.
I did a class,
of the thing.
we attended a class in Seattle, and they gave us a copy, but I don't know how they did that, so I'll find out. I hate to give out a physical copy, you know, and in a lot of these classes, you used to do that sort of thing, but because they change all the time, if I give you a copy in 6 months, it's gonna be out of date. So my recommendation is to look online, but, you know, I'm probably like you guys, I'm not a big fan of reading stuff online. I like to print it out and read it. I'm still a bit
Yeah.
old fashioned that way. So, let's see, where were we?
So what was that, link for?
For the Washington Landlord Tenant Act.
or just where you can get like a,
Right. Where
where you can go like print it out instead of having to read pages.
and I'll look at the hard copy they gave us and see if there's a way to get that. Because it might be that it's available from like the Seattle city website or something
You
like
could
that.
also get
Because I think you're required.
synopsis of it as well in certain places. I can't remember where I found this one, but it's only like 5 pages and it just kind of hits the high points. sort of
Right.
runs
Yeah,
down.
kind of like what we do in the class.
Yeah.
This is Jason again. I hope you enjoyed this video from our Landlord 101 series and found it educational. Be sure to check out our other videos and provide your feedback. Please email or call if you need any help with your commercial or investment real estate needs. Again, thank you.